Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Buzz podcast. Thanks for joining us today during this Holy Week where we are walking with Jesus in his passion towards his death and, of course, the resurrection, which we're eagerly anticipating to celebrate at the end of our Lenten journey. My name is Father Daniele, and I'm joined today by Josh Sullivan.
Hello.
Welcome to you, Josh.
Thank you.
And Matt Van Milgen.
Hi.
Welcome to you, Matt.
Thank you.
And so in this Holy Week, it's hard to believe that Holy Week is here already because Lent has kind of gone by fast in some ways, right?
Speak for yourself.
Not as
For
much.
some, for me, it's gone by fast. Anyways, for some, maybe very excruciatingly slow. Apparently, But we are in Holy Week, and of course, we begin Holy Week with Palm Sunday, where we read the Passion story of Jesus for the first time in our Lenten journey, and then we hear the same Passion story on Good Friday. So this year on Palm Sunday, we read from the Gospel of Luke, the Passion story, and then always on Good Friday, we read from the Passion story of St. John, right? So there is what's sort of popular for people during Holy Week and during Lent, and maybe even outside of the Lenten season, is to meditate and to reflect on the 7 last words of Jesus. These are seven phrases that are spoken by Jesus on the cross, as are recorded in the Gospels, and so they're known as the 7 last words of Jesus, and they're really something to unpack, something to reflect on, and so we're going to talk about those today, and we're going to see if they can give us some last-minute grace here, last-minute reflection and fuel to finish off our Lenten season strong. So there are, even though it's the 7 last words of Christ, they are really kind of 7 phrases of Christ.
7 last sentences.
And they're from the Gospel of Luke, the Gospel of John. There's one from the Psalms.
Matthew and Mark.
We're gonna talk about how some of them are rooted in the Psalms, right? So let's start with the first phrase that is spoken by Jesus on the cross, as recorded in the Gospels, and that's, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do."
That's Luke 23. Luke 23:34.
Yeah, and that is, of course, Jesus is on the cross. He's looking over the crowd, the people who have crucified him, and he's looking out on this crowd. We know from the Gospels that people are jeering and spitting and yelling, and Jesus, actually really dramatically shown in the Passion of the Christ, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think for context too, it's that we have the benefit of hindsight. We've had the Gospels for a long time. We know the kind of whole story eschatologically. But for the people there, we talked a while ago about a practice of putting yourself in the perspective of the people within the biblical narrative. Yes, there were some people who were there and actively knowing what they were doing. These are the people who followed Jesus, challenged him throughout his entire ministry. They were the ones shouting, "Crucify." They were the ones kind of inciting. And there were people who were just showing up on the scene for Simon of Cyrene, or just people are there for the Passover, but they're just showing up. They don't know what's going on. So and a lot of people, even the Roman centurions, who are quote unquote just doing their job, there are varying degrees of awareness of what they're participating in. Some of them are just caught up in mob mentality. Some of them are just doing what they're expected to do. So just that forgive them, for they know not what they do. There's a proportional degree of mercy that we can extend to people, that to the degree that they're culpable, or to the degree that they're not culpable because they don't know. Mm-hmm. They're just not aware. And we all know people same thing. We can look at the people around us and the people who are actively persecuting the church and know they're persecuting the church. They know what they're doing, and but there are people who just either have been misinformed about what the church is, or so again, we can look at Christ being actively merciful in the moment of his suffering, of being crucified, mm-hmm. and we can look at kind of the persecution that the church endures and say, okay, there's a degree of this that's unconscious or subconscious or just not well informed, and again, we can extend that same mercy.
And just there's varying degrees of people's maybe responsibility of knowing what's going on. In the same way, like there's varying degrees of levels that we ourselves choose to forgive, right? We forgive certain people more than others, or we forgive certain groups of people or certain situations more than others, right? Jesus just blanket forgives everyone who's here, whether by chance or whether on purpose. Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know the grandeur of what's going on. They don't know what's happening here. I think it's a really beautiful moment.
Yeah, I think about how the strength that takes just to utter those words. I mean, he's God and he's divine, but in the humanity, in his humanity, being able to say that, not just forgive my apostles for running away, forgive, those, but to say forgive like the ones who just beat me almost to a pulp. Like forgive those ones that just put my hands through nails through my hands, and forgive all of that. And then again, those ones that just were shouting Hosanna and now are you're throwing stones and saying crucify him, to say that and think about those, like that's what he's thinking about, and that's what he's saying. Like he's not so worried. Like he knows he's going to die, so he's not so worried about his salvation. He is worried, quite literally, about the people's salvation around him.
Let's move to the second phrase, the second word of the 7, and that's today you will be with me in paradise.
Yeah.
So Jesus says this to the repentant thief. Remember, there was 2 people crucified on each side of him, right? One we generally know was
the bad thief and the good
bad thief, and one is called the good thief, which so yes, of course, this comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 23, and so there's this the bad thief, save yourself, you're the Christ, save yourself. And the other one's saying, like, what are you talking about? Like, how could you say that?
We deserve to be up here, but he doesn't.
He doesn't, And then he says to Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
Do we know whether the thieves were... I don't think we know the nationality of the thieves, meaning we don't know if they're Jewish people. We don't know if they're... right? That doesn't say any of that kind of stuff in the gospel. So one of the other things that is, he's giving salvation not necessarily to another Israelite, another Jew, another whatever. He's giving it just to a person.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so this opens up the doors in the early church when they were saying, no, you have to be Jewish to have salvation.
Yeah.
You had to be Jewish to become a Christian to have salvation. And this kind of one of those things that refute that. It's just saying, no, salvation through Christ is for everyone. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what you did. He's hanging on the cross just like Jesus, like the bad thief, the good thief. We don't really know. We just know that they're called the thief. So they're being crucified for something that they've done that's definitely worth dying for. I mean, according to the law. But it's where your heart is at. So what is your intent? What is your, those are the things I kind of think of. Like they're both dying for this, I'm going to say a similar crime or whatever. They're both dying for a crime. And, but it's where their heart is that saves them, right?
Yeah.
Like what's the intent? So the intent or where the heart of the good thief is at that saves him, his faith in God.
And what they say is actually really, really important because they both give kind of a profession of faith. It's like, if you're the Christ, do this thing. Like, just a misunderstanding of who the person of Christ is. But there's like, if you are this person, you
should be able to do this.
Save yourself and save us while you're at it. The good thief, Saint Dismas, I think is his name.
Dismas,
rebukes him, but he said, like, we deserve this. Yeah. There's a penitential aspect. There's an admission of sin. Yeah. There's a recognition that I've done something wrong. I deserve kind of the pain of death. He's innocent. Yeah. He's done nothing wrong. So again, that there's an acknowledgement that he's Christ. There's a profession of faith, but there's also some contrition. There's also repentance, and that becomes. And you were saying that this isn't just for the Jews. This becomes for the Gentiles, and this is extended to all humanity. That becomes a beautiful kind of prefiguration of what reconciliation, the sacrament of reconciliation, effectively does. I've sinned. I've done that, but through your redeeming work, you can rectify this, or you have rectified this through the sacrifice.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to see Dismas recognizing who Jesus is from his position of hanging there in his own pain, hanging on the cross, and notices right there, even though him and presumably. They were friends. They were both thieves. Maybe they thieved together, or whatever. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't. Yeah. And calls it out. That's not right. And then takes this moment to be like, I deserve this. We were wrong. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus' words there. Imagine like what Dismas' reaction was. Truly, I tell you, you will be with me in paradise. This day, today, you will be with me in paradise.
Whenever Jesus says truly, like, like that, it pulls some weight to, okay, now stop and listen to what I'm saying to you because this is really important. Truly, whenever he says truly, that kind of, that's the prefix to but this is going to be really important stuff. So that's kind of cool. The only other thing that put out there is we know that because of these two other thieves that were with him, this is the reason why. So they wouldn't have necessarily been nailed to the cross. They could have been just tied to the cross, because part of the whole thing is not to kill these people, but to have them suffer in pain for days, to a point where, because the Romans were really good at making pain last. And so that's why they actually went around to bust the knees. So they went around to buckle all the knees and they would hit your knees out. So then you'd be kind of really hanging, gasping for breath off of
to speed up the process.
Yeah. But when they came to Jesus, they realized, oh, he's already dead. So they just pierced him. So instead of breaking his legs and doing that kind of stuff. But that's how we know that that's kind of what was going on at that time, was because they had these other thieves. So they broke their legs so they'd die faster. So they could get out of the rain and the earthquake.
Both of them have the opportunity, like both of them were beside Jesus. And you can see like one's reaction was to, get angry or, save us, save yourself. The other's reaction was to ask for mercy. And it's like, that's typical of like us as well. Like we can be right beside Jesus. Jesus can be right next to us in life. And sometimes we just miss the mark. Sometimes we're busy complaining, criticizing. God doesn't help me. God's never there for me. God doesn't answer my prayers. And then there's moments in our life where like we recognize that it is the Lord right beside us. Yeah. And we're like, Lord, have mercy on me. You see the difference? And the difference is a matter of salvation, which is it's a huge, and so for us too, as we're moving through this Holy Week, and even after Holy Week, let's remember Christ is next to us. Christ is beside us. Christ is always looking to forgive us as well, which is a beautiful thing. Let's move to the third one.
This is in John.
This is woman, behold your son. I love this. Son, behold your mother. So Jesus also still on the cross here, and he looks down at John and he looks down at Mary, who are at his feet.
This is one of the big ones. There's a lot going on here, and so. But one of the cool things is this is one of those statements that is used oftentimes to argue Mary's perpetual virginity. So we know that Mary didn't have, because sometimes Protestant churches say, oh no, well, Mary had, it says Jesus' brothers or whatever else. But this is one of those times. This specific thing, Jesus giving John his mother, saying take care of her, and then back and forth, like giving the mother to the son to the mother type thing. This would have been a a slap to the face of any brother or sister that Jesus might have had at that time. It would be like saying, Father, okay, you saying at the time, listen, my brothers aren't good enough, so you take my mom and take care of her. Like that's the kind of idea. That would have been a backslap. And one of the last things he would have done on the cross is to backhand his family to give his mother to somebody my brothers can't handle it, so you take care of it. So it's important, but that's not the only significance here, right? But that's kind of one of those things saying that Mary was perpetually virgin because she had no one else to take care of her. So there's a logical aspect of giving Mary to John, and but also giving Mary to the church, giving Mary to saying, here, Mom, take care of now.
And if I'm not mistaken, it actually doesn't mention John explicitly. Right? It says
the
beloved disciple,
the beloved apostles.
It doesn't take too much to know that's how John refers to himself in his gospel. Yeah, and really looking at the theological significance of what's happening here, that really Christ is giving Mary to the church as their mother, as the mother of the church, and the level. The number of things that are going on in this passage.
To instruct also the church to look to Mary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To look, not again, through Mary, and we always get this kind of mixed up, but is giving us the opportunity. Mary's the first Christian. Mary's the first person to say, hey, turn to your mother now. And in times of need, you can turn to your mother. She's got a direct line to me.
Yeah, the command, the imperative verb, behold.
Yeah.
Who else does Jesus say that about in the Gospels? who does he command us to like look at and revere? And it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a special thing, or this is something that is unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the face value, Jesus is showing concern for his mother, and so that this disciple, whom the beloved disciple, will take care of his mother. But yes, on a deeper meaning, Jesus is handing his mom to the care of the greater Christian community, and this is why, some people say like, well, why did Jesus say, "Woman, behold your son," right, and not "Mother, behold your son," and that is, simply kind of implying that Jesus is handing over his mother to the church, which is a really beautiful thing. Like she's not just Christ's mom; she's the mother of our church. She's the mother of all Catholics, and that's why people have a hard time seeing why we revere Mary in such a way. This leads back to this moment where Jesus literally hands her as a gift to the church, which is beautiful.
There's something else there too, and I can't quite remember. So I'll throw out the idea, but I can't remember the sources that I'm remembering. Is that it's also showing the new Eve. So referring to her as woman is showing that Mary's the new Eve, and that this is the new commandment, and that this is the new Adam, and this is the new fulfillment of the covenant, is bringing it right back to Adam and Eve. And so by saying woman, not mother, not saying mom, not saying, it's kind of showing that there's this bringing it back to that new covenant, So I can't remember exactly the full piece of that, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good during this Holy Week to include Mary, to allow Mary to accompany us on our way as well. Okay, let's go on here to number 4, because this is a heavy one, right? And it's what actually this is the response to our psalm on Sunday during Palm Sunday. My God, why have you forsaken me?
This is in Matthew and in Mark, so it's in both Gospels. That same, but it even goes deeper than that, right?
Yeah, I think this is the one that throws people the most. They're just like, okay, well, Jesus is on the cross, and everything up to this point is like, it shows faith in the plan for salvation. That there's like that this seems to be a deviation from that. My God, why have you forsaken me?
Yeah.
This seems like a total contrast from the prayer in
Father,
Gethsemane.
forgive them.
Not my will be done, but
Yeah.
yours. So just like it seems like, okay, well, like what is Jesus doing here? Like what is it? So again, having that hermeneutic key, or having that interpretive key of Psalm 22. Not only is this the first line of Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is kind of traditionally what Jewish people pray at the end of their life. Like this is the death psalm, or like this is what they pray, and it actually becomes or you would say the interpretive key for all of the 7 last sayings of Christ, the 7 last words of Christ. If you go through Psalm 22, you can find just about and like a reference to each of them in Psalm
cool.
22. So there, the final one, we'll get there. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit, is a direct quote from Psalm 31.
Yeah.
But every other one you can tie back to Psalm 22.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is again just a beautiful reflection that in his last moments, the word become flesh is quoting scripture, or is like there's kind of a scriptural reference to what he's saying. So again, like when our RCIA candidates come to us and say, they're like, wait, why is he saying my God? Like on the one hand, he's being a faithful Jew. He's faithful to the tradition of like, this is what you pray as you're dying, but also, Psalm 22 starts with, my God, why have you forsaken me? It doesn't end with, my God, why have you forsaken me? So it goes through this path of acknowledging who God is in the midst of suffering. And then it goes on to not only hope, but it ends on a point of vindication. And again, the 7 last sayings of Christ reflect this. And yeah, maybe if we have time, that when we get through the last one, we can kind of go back and tie it to some various points.
I was going to say, most of the Psalms do that, right? They start from a point of suffering and then go into a point of hope or joy or something like. So there's an ebb and flow to the Psalms oftentimes, and that's what I was saying when you said that. I was like, it starts that way. But a lot of Psalms start that way, but they end with, "But you are my hope, you are my joy, you are my," like, even though this is happening, I'm still going to worship you, kind of thing, which is kind of an interesting when you bring it just. and I'm not mistaken, most of the Jewish people standing around hearing this, right? Most of the Jewish people are going to know exactly what's going on. It's not a new thing to hear somebody cry this out, especially when they're about to die.
Yeah.
So and it would bring them right to that psalm that they would have quoted on a daily basis or on a somewhat regular basis.
Yeah, more than that, they would have known this psalm so well.
Yeah.
That they would get each of the references from
and so it's bringing to mind not only what's going on here, but also, like, if you know that psalm, it's also bringing the hope as well, right? Like, we're not done yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as Psalm 22 goes on, like you sang part of it on Sunday, right?
My God.
All the people deride me and all these things, but as you go along,
finishes
all of the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord.
Yeah,
All of the families of nations shall worship before him. To him indeed shall all who sleep in the earth bow down, and before him shall bow all who go down to the dust, and I shall live for him.
Yeah.
So, like, it begins this.
Flip. Yeah.
Way, but it is probably one of the biggest questions people get, like, why is God forsaking Jesus here? But it is like it's a beautiful expression of Jesus, like connecting everything to the roots of this psalm. But just by saying this one phrase is saying, like, so much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so people take it for face value what Jesus is saying here, but it's actually expressing this deep, like, love and trust into. We'll continue on it if we get more time.
Trust is the right word.
Yeah, trust. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to number 5. It's I thirst.
And John.
2 words, very simple. I thirst.
Yeah. On the one hand, you have kind of the literal interpretation that, like, he's encountered
just had a major workout.
so much blood loss at this point that it's but right back to Psalm 22. I thirst. Verse 14 is I'm poured out like water, and all of my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. That is just like there's you get it in some of the earlier ones, but this is a full. A lot of times we make the sacrifice of Jesus and the suffering of Jesus, we diminish it because he's God. But again, we forget the fact that like he embraced this in his full humanity. Our second reading from this past week was from Philippians, where it's, though being in very nature God, he did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but emptied himself and took on the form of a servant, becoming obedient even to death. And it's like that he's in this moment, like embracing that suffering, that pain, in the fullness of his humanity, emptying himself of his divine nature, which, he could have just shrugged this off, but it's like, no, he chose to, embrace this and experience it in kind of the fully human way. So just, I thirst, that really, really basic human, condition, is an expression of that.
It's cool because the other thing that we know is that they dipped a sponge into
the wine
vinegar, wine, whatever else, and held it up to his lips and stuff. But he also had, like, it's kind of cool to go back. He said that he was not going to celebrate. He's not going to taste again the wine. Like he's not going to finish off the Sabbath meal until he drinks again in the kingdom with, you know what I mean? So him turning away that wine or turning, like, he's being offered wine, soured wine, vinegar, but he's being offered it, and it's like, oh no, that's not what I want. Like, I'm going to receive it when we receive. Like, my last cup is going to be in the kingdom with everyone. So just kind of pronouncing the future, what's going on there. So kind of cool.
Yeah, these 2 words also, like, people talk about it when we use this as a reflection for your own personal prayer. Like, yes, there's Jesus literally thirsting from the cross, but people also reflect on, like, what else is Jesus thirsting for in your own life?
Yes.
Like, he's thirsting for your heart. He's thirsting for your attention. He's thirsting for you to come to him.
Your soul,
Yeah, which is like how we started off this season of Lent, right? With the prophet Joel. Return to me with all your heart. Like, that's what Jesus thirsts for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And right from the cross, you have this, like, short exclamation from Jesus, I thirst. And we can just see it as simply like this physical nourishment that he wanted, just to be quenched of his thirst. But Jesus thirsts for much more than just that moment of
Yeah.
refreshment.
Yeah.
You know,
He's doing it for a reason.
exactly. Okay, we're moving along here. Let's go to number 6, and that is "It is finished." So
John.
that's from the Gospel of John. Jesus is this announces the clarity of he's finished his mission. It's his final act of earthly life, and he says it just moments before he breathes his last breath.
Yes, and this one is really really interesting, especially for me as kind of a post-Protestant, because like this is the work of atonement, the sacrificial work of atonement is completed. So we in Catholicism we believe that the propitiatory sacrifice of the crucifixion and the cross is extended into the mass, we participate in perpetuity in the propitiatory sacrifice of Christ. From a Protestant perspective, a lot of Protestants will point to this, but like, it is finished. This is like the work of salvation is done. We don't need the sacraments. We don't need all of these things. We just need to acknowledge that this happened, acknowledge that it was for us, and that's sufficient for our salvation. And again, for me, it was a journey to kind of recognize that it was like, okay, well, if that is the case, it doesn't really fit with the nature of sacrifice in the Old Testament or in the ancient world. And it's like that if you were making a sacrifice in the Old Testament, if you don't, it's not done. And you can read Leviticus, you can read all of this is how you sacrifice an animal, or this is how you worship sacrificially. It's not over when you kill the animal.
No, yes,
it's not over when you shed the blood.
Right.
Like that's a part of it. That's a necessary part of it. But you have to present it to the Lord. And you have to eat it.
Yeah.
The sacrifice isn't actually complete until you consume it.
The Passover
which is
very
like
clear,
just like just like the Mass and the Eucharist and like the fullness of that circle. And again, I'm just kind of nerding out about biblical language. Like the "it is finished" can, like that word "finished" can also be interpreted as accomplished. It is achieved. That the actual sacrificial work of Christ has been kind of completed in that moment. But again, the propitiatory nature of it is something that we participate in, that we can continue to partake in.
That's really interesting because that is now that you're saying it, I'm picturing the Passover because we just did a little bit on the Passover with some of the youth. But like you're gonna kill the lamb, unblemished lamb. You're gonna spread the after you kill it, you're gonna spread the blood around. You're gonna do some stuff, and then you're going to consume the whole lamb. You're gonna consume all of it. You're gonna consume it. There's gonna be nothing left because you're gonna be running off the next day. But that idea of like you do this and then you consume it, and then it's consumed, or it's consumed by fire, or it's depending on what kind of sacrifice it is and what it's doing. Or you're right. There's a lot of work after that point. So it's accomplished, and then you continue the sacrifice. Yeah. So we receive the Eucharist every day if we want. Cool.
Yeah, that's a beautiful connection to what we celebrate today and every Sunday and every day if you want, right? The Eucharist, this is a celebration of that moment of the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. And we celebrate that like there's no end. It's not over. This is what we celebrate as Catholics, and that's why it's important to us, right? Let's move on to the last one, number 7, and that's "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." It's the last thing Jesus says, and then he breathes his last breath.
It's Luke, right? In the Gospel of Luke 23.
Yep.
I think this is one of the ones where you see it from the beginning and then you see it at the end. The start of the Passion for me, I mean, I know it's, but in the Garden of Olives, like, but not my will, Father, but yours. It's kind of, to me, even though you have the Last Supper, this is the start of the Passion where he's there, he's weeping blood and he's sweating blood and he's, because he's starting the sacrifice, like he knows what's coming, and it's, to me, that's where and even actually, and we talk about the Station of the Cross, the scriptural stations of the cross a lot of times begin in the Garden of Olives, and so this is where the beginning. So Lord, take this cup away from me, but your will, not mine, and then it finishes with "into your hands I commend my spirit." Again, that handing over of will, handing over of everything. I just think, hey, but here, and it kind of, again, if Jesus is he's our Savior, but he's also our guide. And if that's what we're supposed to be doing, like that's a perfect example from the start of the Passion to the end of the Passion is just surrendering, just handing it over, just in complete worship, because worship is sacrifice, worship is surrender, and so that's complete worship right there. All the way through from one from the start to the finish, and that's kind of one of those wrap up sentences for me.
Yeah. And that like the arc of the 7 last sayings actually move from external to internal. That like you have like the world that is like that forgive them, they know not what they do. That like mother your son, like that it's really outwardly focused. And then you have it turns inward. Why have you forsaken me? Like this is Jesus talking about his own. And then in the last one, he turns to the Father. And again, this isn't just an isolated thing. If you're familiar with the Gospels, the way that Jesus relates to the Father throughout the Gospels, he goes off to pray. He's just like, the Father and I are one. Read John chapter 14 to 16 on like the intimacy that Christ experiences with the Father throughout his life and throughout his ministry. So that for this to be the final thing that he say, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. It's the fulfillment of that relationship, and the Father has sent me to do this. It's just it really, really bookends that reality that Christ is talking about all the way along. And again, it's I think this is the final line, if I'm not mistaken, the final line of night prayer in the daily office. And it's like into your hands I commend my spirit. It's like this is
the responsory.
Again, like this is how you close out the day. Like this is the last prayer that should be on our lips as we complete the day, as we complete Lent, as Christ finishes his time on earth.
Yeah.
Pre-resurrection. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful thing. Even I hope that we have the opportunity before we die to be able to say these exact words too, right? Into your hands I commend my spirit. So these 7 phrases, these 7 words of Jesus, you can see why there's a sort of devotion and a time like a prayerful meditation over them, right? What would you say is when we reflect on these things, on these words that Jesus says? Obviously, the last thing that people say before they die is important, right? Yeah. Jesus says these things, and so that's why we remember them, right? But what would you say could give us a little boost as we end off our Holy Week this year and head into the Easter season?
That these provide a really, really great framework for meditating on the life and passion of Christ. So like we spend, even Palm Sunday, like we're into the passion narrative. We're into that solemn time of reflecting on the last moments of Christ's life and really, really slowing down and focusing in on the salvific work that is achieved through the cross, and then into Easter, through the being raised to new life. But also, that the thing that I love about this, or that Christ is the Word become flesh, that this points us not just to this kind of historical moment and the theological significance of that moment. It points us to the whole of salvation history. Like, and you're walking through the Psalms, you're walking through kind of the whole of the Gospels, like step by step. Like everything that he says is connected. Everything that it is the fulfillment of what up to this point a lot of people are like they don't understand. That he said that we would have to take up our cross. He said all these things. This is the moment where it all really comes together, I think, for the people who were witnessing it for the first time. But for us kind of reading and taking the time to reflect on it seriously, it really, really draws us into, hopefully, it draws us into kind of a meditative, prayerful reflection on, what Christ actually did for us and how incredible that is.
It'd be really cool to take these readings now, take these the 7 last words, but then to read the entire Passion. So read the Good Friday, or read the Palm Sunday, I should say, Passion Sunday. Read the Gospels, go through it, but do it with the theme from each of these last 7 words. So the first one, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So read the Passion, the idea of salvation, of forgiveness, of that kind of thing. And then the next one, truly I say to you that you'll be with me in paradise. So read this. So now read it, but now think of like the main theme of salvation. Like this is what that was about, the hope of salvation, all that stuff. Read it through, and then woman, behold your son, your mother, that kind of thing. So the idea there being like, so Mary's part in the church and the church's part, and like, but going through each of these and putting a theme to each of those last words, and then reading the Passion with that theme in mind, which would kind of give a different. You can read the Passion 7 different ways. You know what I mean? Which would give it 7 different things that might pop when you're reading that gospel. So that's, I mean, just came to mind as you guys were talking about this. And then I thought, wow, that would be an idea. So I'm going to do it this week.
It's amazing, like what 7 phrases can do.
Right?
Like there's so much
Completely
to,
flip,
yeah, exactly,
you know?
right?
And so-
And it's really just shows like the immensity of the situation, the power of Christ's words, that these 7 words, these 7 phrases can do that, can make you reflect on so many different things in so many different ways, but also can like summarize salvation history in like this list of 7 things that he said from the cross.
Yeah.
Like thousands of years of salvation history, and Jesus kind of summarizes them right from the cross. It's a really beautiful thing that only our Lord can do, and the Word of God, right? That's the word that Jesus speaks because it's eternal.
Yep.
Well, that's all the time we have. We hope that this might have been helpful for your Holy Week reflections. And we do wish you a great celebration of the Lord's Passion and the great celebration of the resurrection of Jesus. We wish you all the best for a great, holy, and happy Easter. If you want to drop us a line, you can do so at askus@thecatholicbuzz.com, or you can also like or share this episode if you'd like other people to meditate on the 7 last words of Christ. That's all the time we have for today. So for Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milligan, my name is Father Daniele. We'll see you next time on The Catholic Buzz.